Father Deacon. Maybe you could speak a little bit to this issue of self-evident maxims and foundational starting points for a little bit, because this comes up a lot. A lot of Roman Catholics really think this is, kind of self-evident. I need to step away to the little boys' room of the potty.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think, who was it? Maximus was saying that they often attempt to, here's a better account, and offer that. But the problem, I was thinking, was saying that it's only a better account if it's actually true, or that you can establish that you can know stuff. And so that's what seems to be the problem in all of this is, again, certain things are just taken for granted. Now, simply because a group of people who you're talking to might take the same thing for granted, unless you're trying to do maybe a reductio and show them that they're not in a position to know, it really is a bad form of argumentation to argue to any conclusion from that, because we don't know. It begs the question, well, are those things we take for granted, should we accept them? Why are they true? All these different things. And it seems to me that the foundationalists, as well as the classical foundationalists and all the different varieties, they don't question those things. And as Ludwig Wittgenstein says, the problem with people is they just don't put the question mark down far enough. They just stop and, that's good enough. But if those things are false, or if they're unjustified, then any conclusions arrived at cannot actually be known and are not good arguments. So to say that, and let me just pop up real quick, because I was writing something on, one second. I wrote a little something on recently about self-evident. Let me just pop up real quick. I thought I had it ready to go, but because I was just kind of thinking through these kind of arguments and stuff like that. But I'll give you a definition of what self-evident is, and then let's just unpack that. Because natural theology is going to rely on self-evident principles. So will foundationalism as well. Okay, so let's go to okay, self-evident principles. So I'm going to give an argument why there are several problems with the notion of self-evident principles. A claim is said to be self-evident just in case it is true, and adequately understanding it is enough to make you justified in believing it. So that could be a proposition, the whole is greater than the part. So if that's true, and then adequate understanding of whole and part, that would make you justified in believing the self-evident proposition, which is that the whole is greater than the part, or the part's less than the whole. The first problem with this is, obviously, it begs the question. We haven't established how we know a claim is true. So, in some sense, they're just positing that, well, I'm just going to state that this is what you're justified and this is how you know something. But we haven't established that. So we just all agree to it? What if I disagree? What if I say no? So again, it's begging the question, assuming that we actually have determined how we can actually know a claim is true.
So it's like our criterion of justification is established before our criterion of justification.
Now, also notice here, the second condition of what makes something self-evident isn't that it's just true, which we haven't got that yet. How do we know that? But also the second part is adequately understanding is enough. It's sufficient to make you justified in believing it. Well, adequate understanding is something ambiguous or vague. In fact, we were going over this in, I would actually say it's a vague expression rather than ambiguous. We were going over this in logic class today, the difference between vague expressions versus ambiguous. Ambiguous would be like, he's drinking light beer. Well, wait a minute, is it light in color? Is it light in calories? Is it lightweight? light taste, that would be unambiguous. So actually, more properly, the use here of adequate understanding is what we would call a vague. That means I could be in a huge bunch of different meanings and interpretations. Simply stating adequate understanding, there's no clear meaning in that. And that too begs the question. It assumes we have understanding before we've obtained the criteria for what counts as understanding.
Yes.
In other words, it assumes what we want to prove. Next, the idea that an adequate understanding of the terms or proposition is enough, so you recognize that word in logic and philosophy, is a sufficient condition to make one justified in holding that belief, is simply false. And this is based on the false assumption of foundationalism and correspondence theory.
Yeah.
Well, propositions just have their meaning in isolation from the rest of our propositions, beliefs, paradigms, and theories. Right? It's just enough. Once you just read that, and remember, Matt Slick did this too, that there's some things that don't need to be justified or explained. They're enough when you just read Jesus wept. Well, wait a minute. I mean, that connects to a whole host of ideas.
About two natures, the passions.
Is it a person weeping? Is it a nature weeping? Are they united? What it is to weep and all these different things. So it's just a mistake. It's a mistake to actually, and it's simply false, just to say any claim, word, or phrase is enough, because that assumes that it exists in isolation and doesn't depend. Things that are enough don't depend on other stuff. But all words and concepts depend on other beliefs, propositions, theories, etc. So they're not enough. So those are my kind of three critiques of what's self-evident.
Yeah, and like you said, that it ends up assuming that naive basic correspondence doctrine ends up assuming that words are not, and language isn't theory laden, which we covered in the first hour of this discussion when we were talking about things being theory laden or not. I mean, it should be really obvious that language is not self-evident, right? It's the meanings are theory laden, and they depend on the rest of the context, the rest of the language, the rest of the set, the lexicon, etc. All goes into any specific. I mean, just think about a word, right? How I use a word in a sentence can vary all the time to determine the meaning. That was Father Deacon's example with light beer. Is it referring to the color? Is it referring to the weight? Is it referring to the non-fat properties that it has, right? So light beer itself can have many different meanings and senses. And again, I'm even seeing it right now in the chat. People are confused about words as if they only mean one thing. Okay, so most heresies have as one of their features inflexibility in terms of language. They will be totally inflexible, have this rigid attitude that a word simply has one referent, it means that, and that's all it means. And that words mean what they say. And what?
Call no man father.
Yeah, right. Well, there's a guy saying that Paul says everybody's a saint. So how can you say one guy's a saint? I mean, different senses of the word, man. Come on.